I'm Erin Corso.
Hi, Aaron.
Hi, Aaron.
Hi. The first order of business is to accept our minutes from the December meeting. However, we don't have a quorum of board members to do so, of prior board members, so we're going to put that on the agenda for the first televised meeting on January 22nd. Done. Check it off. Oof. All right. Curriculum and possible consensus. Proposed addition to EEP Communications 1 and 2 anchor text list.
Good evening. I'm Carrie Laudadio, the English Language Arts Curriculum Coordinator, and this is Tara Williams, who teaches communications at EEP and was nice enough to come tonight. So our first item is the proposal to add an anchor text to the list for the English course, Communications 1 and 2 at EEP. The book we're proposing to add is called The Inquisitor's Tale. It is a book that mirrors a sort of a modern day Canterbury Tales, incorporates in a lot of humor. It has a good amount of historical context, which would help students develop a good deal of vocabulary. And it does this through sort of a lot of humor in there. It does also explore different cultural backgrounds, religious backgrounds, and it's told through multiple perspectives. So we would use these elements to add to the curriculum, the book. I don't know if you have any questions. Either Tara or I could answer. If anyone wants to see it, I have a copy.
Questions? Do I need consensus to approve?
Yes. Yes.
Questions? Can I have a consensus to move this forward to the consent agenda? Approval for consensus to move it forward to the consent agenda. Yes?
Yes. Yes.
Great, thank you. Thank you, ladies.
Uh-oh.
Oh,
Wait, we're not
all the
done.
way around,
Yeah,
sorry.
we're not done.
Mr. Votto. Yes, thank you.
Yes. Yes.
Yes.
Yes.
And yes.
Yes, all right, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tara. Okay, proposed adoption of a new high school theater unit. Exploration.
All right, this is a unit for a new course that's being run at the high schools. It's the second of 2 units. It is, the course is a foundational course for students in all grades at the high school that incorporates acting as well as elements of stagecraft, directing, and producing. This particular unit explores various theatrical styles throughout history and various cultures, and exposes students to the authentic craft that is theater and provides a hands-on real-world experience. This particular unit culminates with a self-directed theatrical performance incorporating some of the basic elements of acting explored in the unit. And students will write and create a performance for a small audience. It is a 20-week unit, and I don't know if anyone has any questions beyond that.
Karen?
How many students can you accommodate in this class?
Is there a ceiling on enrollment? I'm not sure. Yeah.
It would go along with our other courses, so I'm thinking traditionally we would try to not go above 24 to 26 students, but I don't believe it would be, there would be a cap in terms of a maximum number lower than that.
Okay, thanks.
This is a unit in the Theater 1 course.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yes.
Roxanne?
Yeah. I just have more of a comment. I think this is a great idea, and I think it's a nice opportunity for our students to express themselves in a creative way. And obviously, we have great participation in our productions on both sides of town. So I would imagine this would be a really well-received course. Now, if you are only taking like 24 kids, if we just use that number, how do you give preference? Let's say you get 30 kids that are interested, because it is open, if I heard you say correctly, freshman through senior. Would you give preference to the older Or what's your mindset on
So
that?
next year, we have another new theater course that will start Theater 2 next year. So we're thinking that we'll be able to accommodate more students now that we're going to have a 2-year sequence going on. Next year will be our first year with Theater 2 running.
And oftentimes what happens is it depends, the buildings really, the administrators of the buildings.
They
come up
juggle
with
the schedules. Yeah, I
And
do
so
know
they have
that.
to, and oftentimes, sometimes, even though they're requests, because of the way that the rest of the child's schedule falls out,
Yeah,
it may never open up for them.
right.
So while you might have 30 requests, you might actually only have 22 students whose schedule it actually fits into.
Gotcha. So when you say Theater 2, Carrie, is that the same class, but it's just, or no, that's Theater 2 is builds on Theater 1.
Theater
right?
2 builds on Theater 1. This
Okay.
is our first year Theater 1 is running. We had Dramatic Arts, which we phased out, and we rolled in our 2-year Theater 1, Theater 2 sequence.
Gotcha.
So this year, Theater 1 is running for the first time, and next year we're going to add in Theater 2, which you'll see the curriculum for over the next month or
Great.
so.
Okay, thanks. Thanks for clarifying.
Is this course or the subsequent Theater 2 course, either of those courses prerequisites for participation in our productions?
No, it's encouraged, but it's not a prerequisite. Yeah.
Any other questions? Let's take consensus to approve.
Yes.
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 Yes. Next, C, 3C, proposed adoption of new high school journalism unit, advanced journalism in the field.
Yep. This is a new course that is being run next year for the first time. And unlike Theater 1 and 2, which are 2 separate courses, this course is being run simultaneously in the same classroom as journalism, and is being put into place as sort of an advanced study type of opportunity for students who had already taken the journalism course. And so we have a little blurb on page 6 in the background knowledge for the teacher that explains how the courses will function. So it says, during this course, the instructor will focus primarily on teaching the journalism curriculum, and students who enroll in the Journalism 2 course will function within the journalism classroom in the capacity of an advanced learner in journalistic concepts who will take on the role of apprentice to the teacher and mentor to the Journalism 1 students. Students enrolled in the course are expected to have mastered the skills taught in the journalism curriculum and are advancing their learning through an independent, self-guided journalistic experience in this particular course.
Thank you. Questions?
Yeah, I would assume that when researching a particular topic, that maybe it was under the prior course, that it's kind of explained to the student about to be careful using the internet, that there may be information.
Oh, definitely.
Okay.
Oh, yes.
Definitely there may
Big
be
piece of the course.
Yes.
Yes.
Information out there that is not, valid.
Yes,
Okay.
absolutely.
And how do you go, if you can do it briefly, how do you go about doing it? For a student to be able to.
Yeah, the teacher goes through a good amount of detailed lessons on ways to identify news that wouldn't be credible, making sure that it's appropriate. That is a big piece of the course. Yeah, definitely, as it is in all of our classes. Yeah.
Thank you.
Roxanne?
I'm not sure if I saw it. Is this open to what age group? What grades?
This one is open to 11. This one is, so the journalism one is 9, 10, and this one's 11, 12.
Oh, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks.
Yep.
Mr. Votto?
So it is actually a separate course, but it's just going to be meeting at the same time that you're in one.
Yes. Yes.
So we're kind of combining two courses.
We're kind of combining 2 courses into one and really honing in on students being self-directed, independent, having that
I get
prior background, right?
But you expect bigger numbers that way?
I would imagine.
I mean, but
Yeah.
not too many though.
Right. The course already has smaller numbers, so I think that they're thinking it will be a great way for us to expand on students who this is really of interest to.
How many
More
teachers?
specialized.
Do
One
you-
at each high school.
One teacher in this class that's two classes into one.
Yes.
Does that count as two classes in terms of a teacher contract? Is the teacher teaching, is that two classes for that teacher?
No, it would be teaching one section. So they would be assigned one section. It's one section. We have teachers in the past who have taught, for example, in world language, a combination honors AP, French. That was one teaching
But
period.
that just counts as one section for
Correct.
the teacher. Thank you. Any other questions? Consensus to approve? Mr. Votto?
Yes.
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 Thank you.
Thank you. Lastly, modification of a high school course, world literature.
That's me, sorry.
No. Turn this way.
Yep. So last month at the instructional meeting, we modified some courses to remove the basic level in preparation for course scheduling that's coming up, and we missed one. So world language, it's just one that as we were combing through the program of studies in preparation to get it out to the high schools, it was noticed that that was still remaining and it was missed by our staff. So this is to remove the basic level from this course as we've done in the past month. So if you have any questions, please let me know.
Carrie, is the curriculum basically the same for general and basic, just the way
Correct.
the
Pacing,
say
differentiated,
pacing and stuff
yes.
like that?
Yep.
So the children who would be in the basic program should not have any problem with being in the general.
Correct.
Okay.
Any other questions? Consensus to approve?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Thank you. Moving forward, a presentation on focus monitoring.
Yes, we wanted to share with you this evening, and we have some members of the team that are here to share with you an update. Last year, as you might recall, the Board of Education chose to take the invitation from the state to be one of the districts to come together to look at the discrepancy and trying to close the gap between our students with disabilities and their non-disabled peers when it came to, in particular, elementary reading levels. We did not have to sign up for this. We were identified as a district that could work in this area. I have to say that many of the districts that were invited did not participate because it wasn't mandatory. There were no sanctions, there were no requirements. However, we felt that there was an opportunity to get some support from the state of Connecticut to help us look at our data. There was also an opportunity for us to look internally more closely at what we do, our practice, so we could start closing some of these gaps. So tonight, what we want to do is to have Donna Curtis, who is one of our special ed coordinators, share an update with all of you so that you can see where we are and where we're going. The plan initially started with the elementary, as I said earlier, looking at students at the reading progressions in terms of grades up to grade 3, grade 4 area. The idea was, though, that as a district, we wanted to look beyond that. So there, you will see at the end of the presentation some information in reference to middle school and high school, some of the resources that we've tried to provide for teachers. So I'll turn it over to Donna to just give an overview of where we are and then open it up for questions.
Yeah, and hi. As Sal said, I'm Donna Curtis. I'm the Pre-K Elementary Special Education Coordinator. And I was involved with the Focus Monitoring Group from its inception, and we've got members here who are principals of Pond Hill and Cook Hill, Danielle Belizzi and Christine French, who are part of the team, as well as Jill Hale, who's our middle school special education teacher, and Tammy Kelly, who's our interim middle school and high school special education coordinator. Kira, are you gonna? Yeah. I don't think that's the first one. That's on the first slide. Okay. So Sal gave a lot of the background, but in 2015, we were identified as a Tier 3 based on our grade 3 special education students, their achievement gap in reading compared to their non-disabled peers. And we were required to submit a data wall, which was actually a very extensive activity. We needed to take all of those students, I think there were 45, and review each one of their files from their early intervention through their evaluation process, their eligibility into special education, and then their program up until 3rd grade. And that was to see if we can kind of find some root causes and some patterns in the kind of evaluation supports and early intervention that they received. And then we formed our focus monitoring team, which included special education staff, building principals, central office staff, and teachers, and reading interventionists as well. So it was really a nice, well-rounded group. And as Sal said, we decided to really go above and beyond what the state required us to do, which was really just our 3rd grade special education teachers. We decided that teaching reading was something that was so important that we would look at all of our students, all special education from kindergarten, pre-K really, through 12th grade, and look at regular education students as well and see if we could improve reading district-wide. So we had to come up with some of our beliefs, and we came up with the 3 things that we believed based on our data wall information is that all of our students are general education students first, that when it comes to reading, it really does take a village. All Wallingford teachers have the capability and professional responsibility to teach students in the area of reading, even though we realize that our teachers all have varying degrees of expertise and experience in teaching reading. They all have the capability. And all students have the right to receive appropriate and individualized reading instruction within the least restrictive environment, so that we want to get our children to be learning reading as much as we can in the regular education classroom. And then we had to come up with general information on what we believe, and these are the 4 things that we came up with: that we had to provide ongoing professional development in the area of reading. We needed to build the capacity of general education staff to teach reading, the capacity of special education staff in providing specialized instruction, and that we would examine and revise our SRBI process throughout the district. So by October 15th, 2016, one of our goals were that all pre-K through 5 schools will develop a parent engagement goal. That would be included, in the area of literacy, that would be included in each school's climate plans, and that has been done and is completed. Another goal was that by October 15th, 2016, we would review and revise social emotional behavior screening procedures for grades pre-K through 8, and even though that's not directly related to reading, our children have to be ready to learn. So the district climate management team did select a second social emotional behavioral screening assessment in addition to the DESA. We now have a screening called the BESS. By December 2016, we'll increase collaboration among all staff. So special education teachers now attend monthly grade team level meetings. SPED teachers are required to maintain STAR and IRLA data on all of their students that they case manage. Regular ed teachers attend school-based PPS meetings to review student reading progress, and reading data is regularly reviewed at our PPS meetings. So really trying to make sure that both regular education and special education teachers are aware of our special education students' reading progress. Mike?
First of all, I'm glad to see that goal. That's a good goal. But on the 3rd one, the 3rd bullet, can you explain that?
So each of our elementary schools have what we call PPS meetings. So the special education teachers, related services, all get together with the principal, and they review all kinds of special education needs. So during those meetings, they're reviewing student progress. So
All the students in the school at that time.
I don't think they do all the students at the same time, but if there's a particular student, say, who's really not making the expected growth, they would bring that to the team so they can discuss it, take a look at the goals and objectives, and see what they might need to do differently.
So this says those students who are special ed, they're the ones that are being discussed at these meetings, but you're making sure that the teachers that have those students, the regular ed
Exactly.
teachers, are sitting in on that. They
That's
weren't
exactly
before,
right.
probably,
Yes,
or-
when their students are reviewed at the meetings.
Okay.
So just another way to bring regular and special education teachers together.
That's good.
Can I ask you to back up a slide or two? You talked about the BESS was chosen as a screener in addition to the DESA. Is that being screened as a result of an agreement to test during a PBT process, or is everybody being screened for social emotional development?
So it's not part of the PBS process, it's part of the SRBI process.
Okay.
So, and I can ask principals, is everybody screened at this point?
It's not a universal screen.
Yeah.
So you just determine which one is more appropriate at that point? Thank you.
By September 2017, professional development will be provided for pre-K through 12 special education staff on identification, assessment, interpretation, and development of IEP goals and objectives. We have done a ton of professional development in this area, from standard-based IEPs, professional development on measurable goals and objectives. We've done crosswalks to make sure our IEPs are aligned. So the results of evaluation show the strengths and the weaknesses of each student, and then goals and objectives match. So, and we work with individual special education teachers as well, making sure that their goals and objectives are measurable and that they're taking data. So that if we do see that children are not making expected growth, that we go back to PPT and revise those IEP goals and objectives, or figure out what it is we're doing that's not successful and change that.
I just want to clarify that and want to make sure, because there's people who aren't in the room and haven't been part of the process that are watching this or will watch this. This does not mean that this was not going on before. It means that it was this is just looking at it again at a deeper level, looking at it in a different way. So we had always been working with our teachers in this area. It's just a matter of it was reframing it and really making sure there was consistent language, consistent conversation. So I don't want anyone to be nervous that this is the first time in Wallingford Public Schools history that of September 2017, we decided that we were going to discuss this and offer professional development. That is not the case. It has been going on for forever. But the fact is that it allowed us, now that we had more of a focused approach, hence the name, focused monitoring. So I just want to clarify that, because our staff has worked very, very hard. Our teachers, our administrators, obviously our PPS staff, and I don't want to underestimate the work that's been going on before this. But this was just giving us a little bit more guidance and a little bit more focus to our discussions, and that'll continue. This is not done. You notice it's going to be going on. This is an annual, and I shouldn't even say annual. This is an ongoing, multiple times throughout the years that there's that calibration, there's that discussion that's going on. Especially, when we look at the assessments and we look at identification. I know with mastery-based learning, we've been talking a lot about how does that fit into a PPT process, and we've had those conversations at the board level, talking about mastery of a student, and having standards-based IEPs, it kind of lends itself to that whole environment. So again, I don't mean to take a lot of time, but I just didn't want to leave that unstated and have somebody read this or listen or watch this, a week from now and say, wait a minute, what's going on, because our staff has worked so hard across the district.
Yes.
So one of the things that we noticed as a focus monitoring team was that there was probably some room to make goals and objectives a little more rigorous based on the changes in accepting Common Core standards and changing our curriculum, and that we needed to make sure that our special education teachers were just as well trained in what was expected of all students as they take the SBAC testing and things like that. So that was one of the areas, so I think that goal came out of that discussion.
By March 2017, pre-K through 12 special education staff will engage in PD on improving reading instruction. So we've had ongoing PD in the primary grades on foundational reading skills. So we sent a number of our special education teachers to the week-long Orton Gillingham workshop, which is one of the most well-received workshops that our staff has attended. We've done lots of PD on dyslexia and on assessing for dyslexia, as well as on treating children who are diagnosed with dyslexia. And we continue to send our staff to be trained on the specialized reading programs that they're utilizing to make sure they're kept up to date on most current practices in teaching reading. And that will continue as well. By June 2017, we were going to revise our SRBI process and create SRBI handbooks. And this is to make sure that our SRBI process is consistent throughout the district. All of our schools completed the state's SRBI self-assessment. We met and reviewed those self-assessments at an admin council. The SRBI process has been revised, and paperwork has been shared district-wide with building principals. And the SRBI handbook is completed and is available online.
And I would just like to mention that, again, I'd like to compliment our administrators, because last June we had a Kaizen event as part of our lean process, and both the K2, pre-K2, and 3-5 principals, they came at it from social, emotional, academic. They did their event regarding effectiveness of the process as related to those two areas, and then they came together. Middle school did the same thing, and it really, the conversation, they're still talking about it at all those levels, but it really was a very value-added opportunity for them to look at that process, really dissect it, look at the assessments, as Aaron brought up, the DESA and the BEST, looking at the rigor, the academic rigor, as Christine brought up. So it really, that value-added process that we've been able to use in the district, I think, lent itself well to this. And the work that came out of it, I definitely, first of all, as a district, and many of you who have had children go through the system or do right now, each school up until this year called the SRBI process something different. At one school it was EIP, another school was SRBI, at another school it was student assistance, another one it was whatever. So just to come together and come up with one name was a great opportunity, because it puts us all under the same umbrella so we could have that common language. So I just wanted to bring that to everyone's attention.
By June 2018, special education staff will implement systematic, scientifically based reading instruction. In 2015-16, we purchased a scientifically research-based reading program, and that was provided to all kindergarten through 12 staff. And in addition, we have the Wilson Training Program, which is a specialized reading program. We also have looked at other children who don't have a phonological processing disability, but have more of a visual-based disability, and we found a reading program that addresses that. We've trained our staff on all of these reading programs, and they are utilized now throughout the district. So we're really proud of how far we've come with providing that specialized training for our students. And these are just additional things that we've done. Elementary special education students, we try really hard to make sure they receive daily instruction by their special education teacher in reading. We're really working towards 45 minutes each day. That's what many of the reading programs recommend, and we've really moved forward on that. At the middle school level, we now have longer block schedules, which allows for more consistent reading instruction. Phonological awareness, vocabulary, and other foundational reading skills are provided in co-taught lessons as early as integrated preschool level. At the high school level, students who require specialized reading instruction are able to access their services through their Learning Strategies course. And for our ES reading programs for students with significant disabilities, we developed a new reading program last year where we were able to offer additional support, and we piggybacked transportation onto existing transportation for our Power Play.
And just for clarification for, again, audience and those watching at home, ESY is extended school year for those students who, through their IEP, are receiving those services to reduce the potential for summer loss in terms of their skills that they've acquired during the school year.
Exactly.
I have a question. Don, if you go back to the previous one, it says at the middle school level, the longer block schedule allows for more consistent reading instruction. So these are children who are identified with learning disability, reading, I guess with reading one of the problems. They are, it's a pull-out program where they would normally go to the resource room, or is it just for this reading instruction? And is it the whole block? What are they missing? That's a lot of questions.
Yeah, and I'm going to ask middle school people to kind of expound on that.
I'm Jill Hale. Oh, sorry.
I've heard of you, Joe.
Jill Hale. I was on focus monitoring. I am a special education teacher at the middle school, and this year at Sheehan High School as well. So basically, what we're trying to implement this year in the middle school is to provide a section of time for the students in each resource room. If they go to resource room, they opt out of world language. So it's a PPT decision. Typically it happens when they're coming from us, to us from the elementary school. And we talk to the parents, the team teachers from the elementary schools and whatnot to determine if they should take world language versus a resource room block. The way we're structuring it, we're working this year to structure, we're using 30 minutes in the 6th grade. To give you an example, for 6th grade, they do the first 30 minutes of the 68-minute block. They do the first 30 minutes and they're using the Spire reading program. So I'm myself trained, the teachers are trained in 6th grade as well, and I'm helping to implement this with them because I do have a little bit more of reading background. I'm also trained in the Wilson reading program, so I have a little bit more experience with that. So we're doing a little bit more coaching, and I'm reviewing things with them. So they're going over, they're using the trainings that we've done. We did one this year, and then we've done the ones from the trainer from the Spire program. So they're using the 30-minute blocks. They're going through the formal lesson plans. They're assessing, ongoing assessment. So they're doing 30 minutes because that's where they're coming from with the elementary school. Last year they were doing 30 minutes. And the rest of the block really depends on what they're there for. So the students, yeah, so some students actually go out for speech. Some people go out for counseling, OT, PT, those types of things.
So it's pretty intense in place of world language. They get like a major.
Yes, and the way we've structured.
We did that in my time too.
Yeah. The way we've structured the 6th grade is we've looked at all, and when we were planning with the elementary schools and whatnot, we've looked at their goals and objectives. We looked at the levels that they came from. And we did all the screenings initially, looked at all the data, and separated them into two groups, appropriately placed. So they're able to pick right back up where they were back in 5th grade and moving on. And then the same thing goes throughout the years, the upper years.
Now, there is an opportunity for them to be removed out of there if you see enough growth to probably start a language.
So every year we talk about that at the PPT. Tammy does a lot of the PPTs as well. And that's always something to either continue opting out of world language or not. A lot of times we say, let's master the English language in reading and spelling. And then once they get to the high school, there's always that opportunity. I know I've had many students that have gone to Lyman Hall. I happen to be the DAG side, but they've taken Spanish 1 or they've taken French 1 in the high school. and again, that's a PPT discussion
Right.
that we have. So
The high school level, do they also miss a class?
that's their learning strategy. So it's a accredited course, and Tammy, you can help us out if I mess this up. It is accredited. The Learning Strategies Lab is an accredited course.
But you only take that 1 year though, right?
No, it's she would be better off on that one.
I'm Tammy Kelly. The Learning Strategies class is accredited course, but it is offered from freshman through senior year. So, for example, most of our freshmen who have specific reading goals, when they're transitioning into the high school, we have them take our Learning Strategies class in lieu of a study hall. So they are getting kind of that extra credit because, for their year. So freshman year, potentially a student who has IEP goals, specifically in reading, or if they're taking the Learning Strategies class, could have 8 credits. So it's in lieu of a study hall. They're not missing class. The only difference at the high school level is because of the block scheduling it is every other day, where at elementary and the middle school level, they're getting that specialized reading instruction every day.
Now, do some special ed students still go to resource room in the high school?
Yes. So it depends on their IEP whether they get pull-out time. So a lot of our students, particularly 9th grade, for even other reasons, take that Learning Strategies class. Some of them need assistance with organizational skills, what have you, or to work on other IEP goals. However, they're all our students who get just some pull-out time, so they would get pulled out of a study hall for like 30 minutes a week, depending on what their IEP says.
I guess what I'm getting at,
Yep.
does the Learning Strategies course replace the resource room, or is it in addition to a resource room assistance?
It's kind of in the same resource room. It just looks different. So it basically, if you think of it as their resource room block, that's what that would look like. Right? But it is differentiated a lot of the times between freshmen, because they are still, some of the students, especially this year that we came in, we're still working on those basic reading foundational skills. By sophomore year, their goals have changed to adjust to more comprehension type. So for example, in an LSB block, 45 minutes would be based for more of that reading instruction. The other, 45 minutes or rest of the block time would be based for other IEP goals, pull-out services, and what have you. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Karen? You're all
He
set?
covered my question.
Good job, Mr. Votto.
I'm done.
Thank you. Roxanne?
Thanks. So I just want to be clear. We do have a world language requirement for high school, for graduation, right?
Correct.
Yeah. So what if we have a student that's a special ed student, and I appreciate, you making that decision in middle school, and it could continue on through high school, of taking world language versus, focusing on their need for English as their primary. What accommodations do we ever allow students to graduate
Yes.
not fulfilling that world
Yes.
language
In our-
requirement?
Yes, in our board policy for graduation requirements, there are key areas that do have some option because of where the student is coming in terms of his or her ability.
Okay.
One is special education.
Sure.
The other is our EL students, our
Okay.
English learners.
Okay.
So it is explicitly stated in our policy that through the PPT process or planning process, those adjustments can be made
Okay.
based on students' needs.
Well, the ELS, they probably already have a world language that's.
And that's actually.
you know, that's probably not
we
your
had that
problem with those.
No, but it's some of the other areas, so it
Sure.
might be other requirements.
Okay.
But
we do make those accommodations.
Correct.
That's, that, I'm
Correct.
sorry, Mike?
No, no.
Yeah, they're learning, and we actually just had the conversation about EL students at the middle school today at our middle school level meeting. Carrie introduced that conversation and looking at honoring their native language if we offer that language in our schools.
That's a good
because as
point.
you many of you know, we have many more languages
Sure.
than just Spanish, French, Italian, Latin, and German that our students speak. Not that many people speak Latin, but the thing is that, so we are trying to accommodate that, but the Board of Ed policy
Allows for that.
does allow for all of this.
That was my concern
Yep.
more than anything. Thanks.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Yes.
Okay, so additional things that we've been working on, school psychologists and speech pathologists review case studies at monthly department meetings, and again, so that's everybody's on the same page district-wide on the kind of assessments we're doing and also the kind of therapy we're doing. The PPS department has obtained several reading-based assessments for each school to complete comprehensive reading evaluations, and we got a lot of recommendations from the state for their guidelines for dyslexia. And the PPS department developed an evaluation template for special education teachers to assist in completing comprehensive evaluations, again, so there's consistency between school to school and grade level and grade level. Okay, so this reading data is really on that original cohort for our third graders who are now in sixth grade. The state has told us that we don't have to use SBAC data, we can use goals and objectives on their IEPs. So we really try to make sure that 100% of our students meet their goals and objectives. Also, the progress that they make on their reading programs like Spire or Wilson or whatever they're using. But we also like to make sure that their progress in reading is measured by our district assessments. So for our IRLA data in elementary, as of May 17 at the end of last year, 46.2% of our focus monitoring students made growth for their grade. 53.8% did make less growth than the median growth for their grade. This is a little confusing. The median growth by grades, I guess, for our special education staff is a little less than 4 months to 0.76 months, depending on the school. So this is our special education students, do have cognitive issues, but we are working towards them making continued growth with their IRLA.
Just as a point of reference, this is a challenging slide and also challenging data because remember, these students, as we've talked about many times as a board over the last many years, these students already, for a variety of reasons, come with a larger gap than your general student might come with. So therefore, we're not only making up what they need to make for that grade level of growth, but also they're coming to make up past areas of deficit. So it's kind of difficult because they're being compared to their actual chronological grade level when they most likely did not start there or even maybe a year behind. They might have started 2 years behind. So the data is very difficult. When you look at this, at first you might take a step back and say, okay, well, this is good and bad. It's predominantly when you look at it from the lens of the fact that they're being compared to their peers. When you look at growth, their growth is being made. Again, it's that challenge that the race continues to get longer for this particular group of students. And so that's why we heard earlier when Jill spoke and Tammy spoke about the different interventions and the frequency of intervention and the intensity of intervention. Those are two key components in trying to decrease the time that it takes a student to make growth. But again, it's still a lot of growth that has to be made. So I think that's just, I don't want to discard the data that's up here or disregard the fact that they're making growth. But again, you have to understand and contextualize, which I think you all do, that there's more growth than the average student would have to make.
And for the STAR data, again, keeping in mind what Sal just said, 33.3% of our focus monitoring students exceeded the median. An SGP is student growth percentile of students in their grade, and 66.7% made less growth than the median SGP of students in their grade, but 61.5% made expected growth on the STAR assessment.
And again, that 61.5 is what we're really looking at. So, you know, 2/3 of the students made the expected growth, which is good. It's not where we want to end up. There's still opportunity for growth on our part to work with those students, but that is something that shows that we're moving the needle in the right direction.
That's as of May of 17.
Yes.
Correct.
Yes.
Like what were they a year before that? Have you got an idea?
I did not put that.
I don't like to put you on the spot.
But I could get it
I'm
for
just
you,
wondering.
Mike. We can get it.
No, it's not that necessary, but you saw significant growth, I would
Yes,
imagine, right?
we are seeing continued growth, and that's really what we're looking for.
That's
Yeah,
what we want.
yeah. And we're trying to find ways to really increase that growth by working with regular education teachers, with our special education teachers. That's part of what we're doing. So the next step, we're going to continue with professional development in the area of reading, and especially with dyslexia. We're going to continue increased collaboration between our regular and special education staff. We're going to create some video modules of reading strategies. So we take videos of teachers who are expert in their field and then share those. So we're sharing what's working. And our SRBI process will continue to be monitored and revised as needed. We are developing an assistive technology team. It's already been put together, and we're continuing the training, and why that's important, especially for our dyslexic children. Assistive technology plays a huge role in assisting those students. We're continuing training on writing standard-based IEPs, and our service delivery models for implementing reading instruction will continue to be modified across all the levels to ensure that all students get the reading instruction that they need.
Thank you. Any other questions? Thank you.
Thank you all for coming. We appreciate it.
Okay, moving forward, proposed changes to STEP, the LSAT test. Mr. Andreessen?
Good evening, everybody. I'm Jim Andreessen, STEP teacher. So we made some changes to STEP last year through this board, and anytime you make changes, there's sometimes bumps in the road. And what we're doing is we're proposing a tweak, a small tweak to our process. We're not proposing a change to the criteria that we discussed and prepared last year. We feel great empathy for our students. We're sort of on the front line. The three of us are with our students on a daily basis, and we get to see the impact that this LSAT test has on our students. As the district moves to mastery-based learning, we feel that having a test that essentially fails a kid out of step with no chance of a redo, no chance of a retake, it doesn't really fit too well with that philosophy.
So I
I guess I'm up. So I'm just going to really quickly go over the history of the actual ALSAT testing very, very quickly. So the ALSAT is administered in grades 3, 5, and 7 as a way that we have used in the past for as long as anyone can remember as a way to include students in the STEP program. It's always been an inclusionary tool. So students take that test in 3rd grade for inclusion in the 4th and 5th grade STEP program. They take it in, then it was re-administered in 5th grade to add more students to the program, and the numbers increased for middle school. And then it was re-administered again in 7th grade to add even more students that might have slipped through the process. Last year in our revision of the whole procedure and criteria, we then added the exit criteria. So now, rather than just being an inclusionary tool, we have added the dimension where the ALSAT is used as exit criteria as well. So that, in a nutshell, is the history of the ALSAT.
Good evening, everyone. I'm George Bikakis. Overall, the proposal is that we don't want to make any changes to the identification criteria that we pretty much did last year. We want to still continue the OLSAT for 3rd grade, so we can start the program for the 4th, and then of course for 5th grade, so we can continue for our middle school process. The only thing that we want to change.
I'm sorry, could you repeat that last part again?
So we want to keep the OLSAT for 3rd grade and for 5th grade.
And do it again in 5th grade?
Correct.
Even to those who passed it in 3rd grade?
Correct.
That's present practice.
Right.
Present practice.
And you want to continue that?
We don't want to change anything.
We don't want to change that. The only thing we want to change is basically removing the OLSAT for the 7th grade level, and discontinue the new determination for eligibility for 8th grade.
So I don't want to go over the entire rationale, but you have it in front of you, and I believe you've had it maybe for the weekend. So the sort of the subject headings. We have our theories, but we really don't know why we test in grades 3, 5, and 7. We believe that in grades 3 and 5 there is a sound rationale. In the 7th grade, we believe there are testing issues, which we identified in the document. Removal from STEP comes at a critical point in adolescent development in the middle school. We've had some feedback from parents that they're concerned about the impact that removal has had on their kids, or the risk, the threat of removal. Except for STEP, the STEP decision, the ULSAT test really has limited use for other teachers in the district, but it does have some costs. And then we had a couple of other rationale. So at this point, we're just going to open it up to questions, discussion. I don't know if you have any.
Roxanne?
Yeah, so I'm just looking on the second page. Well, let me first ask a question. Roughly, how many students do we have each at Moran and DAG, say, in 7th grade? In the STEP program, sorry.
Total students? So
in each.
Moran, it's this year in grade 7, it's 48.
48, okay. And at DAC, do we know? Well, about the same, or give or take? Yeah, I mean, that's fine. So I look at this bullet, and I get concerned when I say, last year at Moran, 11 students were removed from the program and 14 others were at risk of removal for a period of 4 months. And then for DAG, it was 18 were removed and 5 were, well, first I'd like to know, what does that mean, at risk of removal for a period of 4 months? Let's start there then, I guess.
Okay, so the risk of removal is so we increase the, we, including this board, we increase the criteria to stay in STEP to get identified for STEP from the 90th percentile to the 94th percentile.
Right.
And so if a kid scored, 90th percentile or even 88th percentile, they could be removed from the program. So that's at risk. They're not all automatically eliminated, but some of them can be. So there's this period from the time they take the test in around now, February, January, until the end of the year is when they finally get notice. So they're sort of in limbo. I might be out of STEP for the next year, and they don't know the answer until June.
Okay. Because it just seems like, like at Moran, that's 50% of the kids that are roughly in the program that are either looking to be pulled out or at risk. And even at DAG, it's close to, roughly 50% of the kids. So what does that speak to? I'm not sure.
I was very concerned when I saw those numbers, so I started to do some research.
Yeah.
And one of the things I found, Roxanne, was that especially among the gifted population, the older that students get, especially with a group administered test, the more they tend to overthink. And there have been studies that actually found that in a group administered test, their scores tend to go down the older the student gets, because they start to overthink the questions and they start to question themselves, therefore not answering, not finishing the tests. I can't attest to every single student.
No, it's anecdotal.
So we took this so to heart that we actually scheduled a conference call with Pearson to ask about these things. We've actually sent someone data, and they're actually investigating this for us to help us to understand this phenomenon. Because if you see, there are so many students who fell down. This doesn't happen as a phenomenon in 5th grade. In fact, 3rd grade scores tend to either maintain or go up slightly, which is what should happen. But for some reason, in 5th grade, we see this great fluctuation. Now, whether it's due to anxiety because they know there's so much at stake with, I might be dropped from this program, which is definitely something that kids have voiced to us, or whether it is this phenomenon of the higher, the more invested they are, the more abstract reasoning they employ, the more they overthink their questions. I don't know, I can't get into their heads.
Right, of course.
We see this large number who are dropped and a very small number that we're including. So again, we go back to the whole question of empathy. We're not replacing this large number of kids with another large number of kids.
Yep.
Is it worth it for 1 year to do this to these students when we can just allow them to have that last year in the program, and then the program's over in 8th grade? They go on to high school and there's no more step. They
But
just go
I
on
guess,
to different
I guess
levels.
I'm worried about, are we really identifying a pure analogy of the right individuals at the middle school? I appreciate the stakes get changed as you go along. So do you use other criteria for exiting besides the LSAT?
First, let me address the large number. That's also partly sort of a deliberate decision to downsize the program that was made here.
Well, by raising the
Right, but
entrance.
we've also gone from like sort of a cap number of 48 was our old, that's what I have in grade 7, to 36. So, without any changes, you wouldn't see these numbers year after year after year, because my current 6th grade class has, I believe, exactly 36. There would still be kids who could be eliminated, but it's unusually high this year because we're going from a class size of 48 to 36. So automatically there's sort of 12 kids.
And that's based on the criteria change that we instituted, right? Am I saying that correctly?
And also those students had a criteria of entrance of 90.
Right, and now we've
then had to
raised.
be exited with a higher criteria.
Of course, I understand that. But do we use other, thank you for clarifying, that's an important point because we did make that change, I think. So what other criteria do we use, or do you guys use for exiting?
We use the SBAC test. We use a teacher, not SBAC, I'm sorry. STAR testing, sorry. And we use the GRS. Yeah, but we also increased the weight that the LSAT carries. I don't remember what it was last year, 50% before? 50, it might have been 45 or 50 last year, now it's 60%. So that LSAT carries a lot more weight.
Karen?
Well, I just wanted to make that point that because we increased the criteria to 94%, you would expect that there would be some students that would not make that grade because they were admitted under the 90% rule. So going forward, I would not expect to see that number of students exited, because I asked for the actual raw data and looked at across the board what students' grades were. And so I think that comprises some of those students that would have been between that 90 and 94th percentile.
Approximately how many new 8th grade students do you guys see as a result of testing in 7th grade? Or as a result of that LSAT in 7th grade?
So last year I had two
Okay.
brand new kids.
In 8th grade.
As a result of that 7th grade test.
And we had 5.
But you exited all the, yeah, okay.
And I don't think this is on anything we shared with you, but, you know, another reason maybe to consider is I think these kids who come in at the last year join a group that's been together for at least 2 years, and in some cases, they've been together since the 4th grade. And I think they feel less a sense of community. So of the 2 kids that joined this year, one of them dropped almost immediately. And at DAG, out of the new kids, did any drop? 1. So out of the 5, 1 dropped. So I think that's, you know, another rationale that we didn't really address.
Mr. Votto?
All right, so currently, all the children who have passed 5th grade, the LSAT and whatnot, and they've been in 6th grade, 7th grade, they all have to retake the test in 7th grade. Correct? And you might add a couple of kids.
But you're exiting some too, potentially.
Right. When a child takes the LSAT in 3rd grade, and they take it again in 5th grade, what's the percentage of kids who would be exited as a result of that test? I mean, does it really go down much, or does it stay the same?
This past year, I think 3 were exited from who didn't requalify. 3 district-wide.
Based on just the LSAT?
Based on all the criteria.
3 kids?
3. And there was not an appeal made by those parents. It was a very natural transition for these students. They, you know, it was kind of expected, anticipated. They were going from a lower school to a middle school. It was very natural. It was very natural. It was not
So you're saying
painless,
3
but
kids, but is that historically the way it usually happens?
well, we've never done it before. This is the first time this is the first time we've ever done this.
Retested in 5th?
No.
It's the first time we ever exited anyone based
No, I
on
mean,
those
no,
criteria.
no, going back to a child who took the LSAT in 3rd grade, got into STEP, they take it again in 5th grade. How many kids have not made it after this is the first year we've done that, so they would exit. But what am I trying to say?
Do I see this phenomenon of their scores dropping?
In 5th grade, the same kids, when they take the test again in 5th grade.
Right. What I'm saying is historically, their scores stay the same
They do stay the same.
or increase.
What I'm getting at is.
It doesn't
why
happen.
we give the test
It-
again in 5th grade sometime, you know,
Well, that's a very good question, because when you look, honestly, this is why I did some research. When you look at most gifted sites, they test, they identify, they don't do it again. Why we do it every other year is
would think-
what we were trying to find out.
I would think one of the things that change when a child gets to 5th, 6th, 7th grade is their work ethic, their studies, their habits of work, you know? Those kind of things change. So that, to me, would be even greater than, you can still be a very good student, having a high IQ and do very well on that test again in 5th grade, but be a lousy student. I don't mean that in that sense, you know what I mean? Not a good student because they have other interests or, you know what happens.
Well, what I was trying to whisper in their ear was to talk to what happens in their classrooms, because we do have an exit criteria in place with our progress reports about student performance in the classroom. And what happens in their classroom doesn't mesh with what's happening with those test results. What happened with those 3rd graders, possibly the kids going forward into 5th grade, a little bit more of a correspondence with classroom performance, but out of those 18 and those 11 students, they can talk more about classroom performance.
Roxanne?
Make sure Mike's done.
Yeah, I just wanted to add that the LSAT test it shouldn't matter what your work ethic is. It's an ability test, not an achievement test. So even if and some of our kids don't really do that well academically. Some kids do poorly in the regular classroom because of habits of work type issues. But that shouldn't affect the LSAT test.
No, but it could affect them. Isn't that one of the criteria?
Performance in the regular classroom? No. Well, the STAR testing, that's not ability testing.
It's not their grades that
What's
is
the other
factored.
one, the
The GRS, so that's a teacher's rating on a bunch of criteria. And yeah, some of those things could be, but it's like one of them is ability, the teacher's opinion on the student's ability. Another one is motivation, so they would score low in motivation.
That's what I'm trying to say.
Yes, that's true.
And those things
Just-
come into play.
And I think I asked this question once before. Based on your teacher exit criteria that you've had for many years, how many students have you exited? I think the answer I got was none.
Yeah, so this is a new procedure, so we haven't exited people yet. And I would just add as a teacher that, I'm not looking to get kids out of my program. My instinct as a teacher from the get-go is, here's the kids I've got, regardless of their level. Yes, we try to identify kids who are at, an appropriate level for a gifted program. But I look at the kids wherever they are, and I want to make them better. That's my goal. My goal is not to push the kids out of the program and say, you don't cut it here.
Okay, so we have to decide whether or not they take the test again
I
in
still
7th
have
grade.
questions.
Go ahead,
I'm
Ryan.
still not, I'm still struggling with these bullets here because to me, this is an argument to test them for 7th grade, frankly, when I see these numbers. But I guess you just made a comment, and maybe it's going to reverse my way of thinking. So those 11 and 18 students that we removed from the program, were they basically removed because of the criteria change? Or was it because, I guess, is that, let me just leave that question at that. Is that why they were exited?
Yeah.
Okay, just because we went from 90 to 94, that was what caused those
Correct.
11 and
so
18 students.
If you score below 94, and a good number did, then you're sort of in limbo until there's other criteria. You're not automatically out
I
for the
understand,
kids. It's not exactly grandfathering, but it was sort of like grandfathering. It's like, hey, and then we took some of those kids back in, even though they scored below 94, and the rest were excluded.
Why did you take them in?
We basically took the top 36. So the ones who are 94 plus, automatically in.
Sure.
The ones who scored below 94, we said, okay, we'll consider 36 to be sort of an ideal number for this program. And so we rank ordered them by all the criteria, developed like an index score, and we took the top 36.
So
then there was like a cut line, basically, and everybody below that was excluded.
So you're saying in prior years, you didn't exit really virtually any kids in 7th grade?
We started
Prior
exiting
years.
kids, a few kids, using the LSAT. I believe the cutoff was 85, the 85th percentile and below, and that was, I don't remember how many years ago, 3-4 years ago. And then last year, this year's
With
the
the
first year we
change.
saw it was the change to 94, and so
But
basically it's a new process.
That didn't have an impact on exiting students from the 5th grade testing?
Historically, what we found
No, I
is-
mean, because of the change that we made.
Correct. 3 students, I believe Karen said, were exited district-wide because of the 5th grade testing. What we found historically is in 5th grade is we actually add a lot of students instead of losing a lot of students. In the 7th grade,
And that might be a maturity thing. Would that be a fair statement, that by the maturity between 3rd and 5th grade might show intellectual prowess, or no? They're independent.
Can you just restate that? I'm sorry.
I was just wondering if the maturity of the student is a factor in their intellectual prowess between 3rd and 5th grade.
Once again, I'll restate, I think that the older they get, the more they see the stakes.
Right.
that are-
Well, that's
the
7th,
cost,
yeah,
right.
okay. But they might have that awareness,
And
that
maybe-
self-awareness even in 5th grade,
And
is your
some
point.
awareness in 5th
Sure.
grade, right. So once again, I just want to cycle back to the whole, and where we came from with this. And a lot of it came off the heels of the appeals that we heard at the end of last year and over the summer. And they were primarily from 7th grade parents who were pleading their children's cases. And
Sure.
how heartbreaking it was for their children
I
to be
imagine that
exited.
is.
It was.
Yeah.
So this is where this came from with us, and we wanted to just kind of, we opened it up as a discussion with ourselves as to is the purpose of adding 2 or 3 students to the program worth the cost?
The angst of.
The angst of exiting this. I know that once we get through this next batch of 7th graders, which will be the last group, I believe, of this large group that entered at 90, we should be we shouldn't have the numbers, but there still will be some students. We do have a process in place where we can exit students who are not working to potential. We do have a process in place where administrators and teachers who see potential in other students can come to us and say, listen, I think we maybe missed a student. Can you retest them with the COGAT test and include them?
When that happens, if you have a hard, fast 36 student limit, but then you have a new student or a teacher or an administrator that comes to you and says, can you retest, can you look at this kid again, and he
Well,
or
that's
she...
why we're here tonight, and so that's why I was going to interject. The reason why we're here tonight, and just for the new board members to give you a little background, this has been about a 3-year discussion, if not longer, that we had a challenge because there were students who got identified in 7th grade that had higher scores than students who were presently in the program. And it was known. I mean, unfortunately, there is that group of students who, for better or for worse, they talk, and they're adolescents. They're going to. That's their human nature. That's not a slight towards them. It's just developmentally. So we had a group of students that were, because there was really no formal exit criteria, there was the teacher exit criteria, which I had shared before. No student had ever been exited using that criteria. So that was a criteria, but wasn't necessarily used, and I agree with Jim, is not looking to have students leave his program. None of them are. No classroom teacher would. So that was where there was a rub. So while this year they heard appeals of those students who didn't get in because they once were in, we were hearing appeals, many appeals of students who felt their parents and they felt they should be in the program over other students because they didn't have as high of a testing scores. So it kind of is the dog chasing its tail, because there was that whole conversation. So that's why then we had the conversation at the board meeting last year where we talked about, well, what is truly a criteria for gifted? And that's where Karen volunteered to be part of the STEP management team and talk a little bit about when we identify anything, you look within the 97, 98 percentile to look at true giftedness. So that's when the board made that decision. But they knew there was going to be, and we kind of expected there was going to be this kind of period of time where there were going to be 2 cohorts of students where that we might see this gap. So I don't know if I got that right, but it was kind of one of those scenarios where we wanted to address the issue that we had some students who were really not able to be exited from a program because there wasn't really anything to be said for that or anything really codified for that. So that's why this was put in place, because it was really once you were in STEP in 6th grade, you were in STEP for 6th, 7th, and 8th. And that's kind of where we were going back to right now. If you chose to go in that direction, we'd be going back to where we were when we started this conversation initially. Well, we did, but you could still not be exited. So you were always in the program. So we were still testing, but more people might have been added to the list that might have had higher scores than those that were tested, but they weren't going to be removed because they were already part of the program.
So everything you just said would still happen in the 5th grade. We're not proposing any change to that. So if a kid scored low who was already in STEP and a new student scored higher, they could displace that student. They would take that spot. So that addresses that concern. What we're saying is don't test it all in grade 7. Right. You know, Pearson doesn't recommend multiple year testing. As Karen said, most districts test once and done. Pearson even was surprised. When we talked to them on the phone a couple weeks ago, they were like, what, you're testing 3 times? They were almost incredulous. So we're not changing that. We're not saying we shouldn't take kids out of STEP. What we're saying is we're not going to identify new kids in grade 7.
Through the OLSAT as a blanket
Correct.
test for all
Only
7th
if,
graders.
and this is our current procedure and it's in writing, is if a teacher says, hey, this kid's not in STEP, can you take a look at him? Or if the principal says, same thing, we can test. Now, what would we do with a limit of 36 and a kid? If it was my choice, I'd take him. I don't know how the board feels. I don't know, what, but if I had a kid who was missed somehow and we identify and they score 94th percentile, they do very well in the STAR testing, et cetera, I'd take them. I have no trouble with that.
And what if a parent then says, okay, well, you're not going to blanket test all of the 7th grade. However, I think you missed my kid.
The board policy as it is right now is it has to come from a teacher or a principal.
Okay.
So my guess is if I was a teacher, a parent advocate for my kid, I'd go to the teacher or I'd go to the principal and see what they thought. But, right now, a parent cannot request testing. in our policy.
First step.
First step.
Just to add to that, actually,
I have a question about that, and I think we might have to, I don't want to be, interject too much, but I think I might want to have a legal opinion on that, to be honest, because STEP is a special education. Being gifted is a special education requirement, or a title, or a label. So therefore, parents can recommend testing for anything that is a special ed label. So that's where I'm a little concerned. I think we as I'm listening to this just literally came to my mind. So I apologize, but I would want to make certain that I don't think we could deny a parent the ability to have his or her child tested if they chose to be tested.
actually, at DAG, this year we had a student who was recommended by the parent, and sent me an email saying, could you check out my kid? And I talked to the young lady's teachers, and they said, yeah, absolutely. Why isn't she in STEP and all that kind of stuff? And we did give her the COGAT, and she did fulfill the requirements for STEP. So that's one example of what happened this year.
Yeah, so I think we wouldn't be able to personally, because it is a special ed classification, that there's an IEP. Technically, we don't, as we all know, we've heard before, state doesn't require us to program, but requires to identify. So therefore, we would need to offer that assessment if a parent requested it, because it would be under the
Certainly, if
state
that's a requirement, I think that's something that we should do. I'm certainly not opposed to it. But the question before us right now is, should we test in 7th grade? And I don't think that affects that decision.
It does and it doesn't, because if you're a parent that's well informed about this policy and the state statute, then you would access your rights to having your child assessed. If you're a parent who's maybe less informed or new to the district, new to the country, new to the area, they might not be aware of that. And if we're not universally providing that opportunity, then we might be missing out on somebody who's truly gifted and not getting the resources that you all offer.
I know, Dr. Menza, whenever there's a new student to any of the elementary schools, first thing I do is check their records and talk to the teachers, and if they are potential STEP students, and I pursue testing for them.
The thing is, and I appreciate you doing that.
That's our current policy, is if a student has a label of giftedness from another district, we honor that. Even if the student's not labeled as gifted, our current policy is if a teacher or the principal sees some potential there, then we can test. We can do the COGAT. So that's our current policy.
I just playing devil's advocate for the child who might not demonstrate, like you said, sometimes a truly gifted student isn't working to his or her potential in a class. The parent might not be
Savvy enough.
able to be able to provide the same support. I feel badly for those children. I guess it's our job to make sure that we ensure equity and not necessarily equality, but equity. And I guess I just would want to, if we are moving in this direction, that we really do create some safeguards that are universally known to our parents and explained beyond just a newsletter or an email. I'm just concerned about that, because I think that we, and for better or for worse, and I think for the better, our responsibilities as educators when students are with us, we're their parents. We're the ones that are responsible for them. And I think that I just am concerned that, again, that is that pivotal period, that 7th grade, 8th grade year. If you have an opportunity to catch a child into these experiences that might really transform their decision making for high school and post high school experiences, I would hate to miss that. So I don't mean to be throwing another monkey wrench into this, but because I see the emotional side of it too. We saw it last year. We were very taken aback by a student who we all felt for dearly. We certainly felt that there was a lot of emotional angst that child experienced. But I just want to be, I guess I just want to be cautious, because we can't just assume that every child comes or their parents are aware, not because of anything other than they might not just personally be aware of these particular opportunities for their students. So I just want to put that out there.
So every child takes the test in 5th grade, correct? Everyone?
Yes.
3rd and 5th.
And 3rd.
And 7th.
Third, but, see, I have to say, historically, that's where the history is.
Yeah.
It's always been that way.
Yeah, it's always been
And
7th grade
feel
too.
right,
It's
and
always
7th
been
grade
7th grade too. Yeah.
The thing that bothers me, and I can understand on the back page there, those 3 bullets, when you have to dismiss a child. you know, in 7th grade.
But I don't know if that's a bubble, and we're hearing that might be a uniqueness because of the changes. I almost wonder if.
That'll change.
Well, I'm wondering if this is premature, if we should wait and see, once we get that 90 percentile cohort out of our system, I don't know if I'm even saying that right, but out of our system, and we truly just have true 94% tested people, kids, students, and see how that plays out. And then because I'll be honest, this is an argument to keep it in 7th grade, these stats.
I'm not sure what stats you're talking about.
That we removed 11 students and 18 students, but we don't know if that's just simply because of the criteria change that we made.
So the numbers certainly will go down, the number of kids affected after this year.
I would think
This is the
so.
last year of those large numbers.
Yeah.
Absolutely, and
Yeah,
there's no doubt about it. But the fact is that there will always be kids that this happens to, like the 3 kids. We have tremendous empathy for what those kids and those families go through.
Yeah, I respect that.
Honestly, I don't see the benefit that outweighs, even if it's just a few kids, the harm that causes to families and kids at a critical stage.
Well, but it's really, but they don't meet the criteria of the program anymore. That's what concerns me. I mean, am I being too rigid in my thinking? I'll take that. I'm not sure if I am being too rigid in my thinking, but I don't know.
Well,
I don't know.
if I was just going to sort of wrap up my position on this, I don't think this is a big change. I think this is a little change. We're not changing the criteria that we talked about, quite a bit last year. I think the benefit that this has for families and for kids is great. In essence, it's almost like grandfathering this bubble group this year, if you were to decide to do this tonight or very soon, because the testing window closes at the end of February. So if we're going to test this year, we have to know soon so that the middle schools can put that testing into place. But even after this year, there will always be kids that go through this. I don't know why we test in 7th grade. Pearson doesn't know why we test in 7th grade. They were surprised when we told them that we test in 7th grade. So that's my feeling. I feel it's almost like a no-brainer. It's like to me, it seems like it's good for kids. I don't see the harm, but
I guess
that's me.
the no-brainer for me that I'm a little confused on, and I think again, I heard you say before, and I guess this is, and maybe I misunderstood what you said, but that we have students in the program. Our criteria is what % for 8th grade, or for 7th grade?
Percentile score to get into the
Percentile
program.
score,
You have
yeah.
to score at the 94th percentile or above.
Okay, so do we have students? Do you have students in your class right now that didn't score at the 94th percentile?
In the 5th grade, when they took the test, the criteria was the 90th percentile.
Okay, but in our
Every single one of them scored above the
But-
90th percentile.
But in our 7th grade, now that because we lost,
They haven't
these
tested
students.
yet, so we don't know what their tests are going to be.
The 7th grade that went into 8th grade, Jim, the ones that were lost.
I have some kids, yes, in the 8th
So
grade.
why-
I believe George does too.
I'm confused as to. I'm just wondering. I don't have the answer to this, but I'm just wondering if the criteria is 94th percentile. How did those other students get?
So those students in the 8th grade also tested in 5th grade at the 90th percentile. So some of them are between 90 and 94, and some of them are below 90. And why? It's a mystery to me. That's
We don't.
that's why we
But
have
I
a
guess,
call in
and
to
they're
Pearson.
still in the program because.
The criteria that you adopted allows a student who's currently in STEP to go through the process of the GRS and their STAR
Oh, so the
scores
other two
to put
pieces.
them on the
That's
correct-
all I
on
needed
the
to hear.
continuum
I just
see
wanted to
where they
clarify
fall.
that.
And if
And
they
most of-
score low, they are displaced by anyone else
Who scores above them?
Scores above them.
Gotcha.
So
I just
we're-
wanted to clarify that. I thought that was because you had mentioned STAR before, but I didn't put the two together, so I apologize. But I just wanted to clarify that for also, yes, because people hearing this at home, there might be a parent or a student who's watching who maybe wasn't in STEP, tested in 7th grade, had certain level scores, wonder why they didn't get entered into it, and I just wanted to clarify that.
Karen?
So when will this entire 90 to 94% cohort be through?
My current 5th graders still were entered under the 90th percentile. So
But they're
They are the
getting
last group. So my fourth graders
But they're getting,
entered under
the
the
fifth graders are getting tested.
Yeah.
fifth graders are, but they will be held to the 94th percentile as their new criteria.
I'm asking, right, I'm asking the 90 to the 94th,
When does it go away?
that group.
They are
That
the
still
last
exists.
group that was tested and accepted into the program with the 90th percentile as their cutoff. They are currently in fifth grade, so this test for them will
The
be.
bar is raised for them. They need to hit 94
Right.
to remain
But
in
they
step.
are the last
But in
group.
middle school, are the current eighth graders, they're in under 90th or 94th? They're in under 90th. The seventh graders are in under 90th. The sixth graders are in under 94th.
Yeah, that's right.
Does that clarify?
Right, so this is the last, really the last group.
Yeah.
That is correct.
Thank
That
you.
will be that last bubble between 90 and 94.
So as a committee
But
tonight. Yep.
there is a variability that's natural. So if I score 94th percentile this year, doesn't mean every single time that I take the test, I'm going to score 94th. I might score 92 or 96. And so there's always going to be kids in this category. Yes, the number will be smaller next year and from then on, assuming no other changes. But there will always be kids who are in this category.
So tonight, oh, go ahead, Mr.
So
Votto.
if we don't test in seventh grade, are there gonna be children overlooked that could be in the program?
That was my question, and what they're telling us is they have this, what's the name of that test? The additional test? COGAT to use to help determine whether or not we missed anybody, or for a new student to the district, or a student who's coming from another school. I think tonight as a committee, we need to decide whether or not we're comfortable moving this forward, or we need more information perhaps from lawyers to, that's a different issue.
That issue, I think I'm really pretty comfortable with the fact that if a parent chooses to have their child tested, especially for a special education potential identification, they have a right to access that testing.
That's right.
So I'm good with that one.
Okay, so at this point, we need to decide whether or not we want to approve their request to eliminate the seventh grade OLSAT test and move it forward. Well, we need to move it forward to the full board, correct? That sound right?
Well, yeah.
We need to come to a consensus whether or not we're going to vote on this at the larger meeting. Mr. Votto?
That's why I sat here.
Let that be a lesson.
Yeah.
Don't sit at the end.
All right, so if I say, just help me here, if
I
I say
get-
yes,
If you say yes, we're going to vote on it at a larger meeting to remove that seventh grade OLSAT.
yes.
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 To remove it from seventh grade.
We're going to vote it on the big meeting to whether or not to.
consent. It's
We're going to add it to the consent agenda.
No, it'll
Yeah, we go to the consent agenda.
Just add it to the consent agenda.
Yeah.
Is that clear?
No. I thought it was to carry it to discussion to the.
No, this-
Carry it to
Uh-uh.
consent agenda.
Okay, 'cause it didn't say consent. It just said presentation, so. I
Well, it's
was
all
confused.
consent. This is all, everything we do is consent in committee, so that would be.
to go to the consent agenda.
But from a procedural standpoint, Tammy, I was just going to say, you can, any board member, I want to be clear, any board member, anything that's on our consent agenda, we ask, is there something you want removed? You always, as a board member, have the right to remove something that even that we, as a board, pushed forward to the consent agenda. You have one more time to say, I changed my mind, I don't want it to be, I want it removed from the consent agenda.
We'll vote
So,
on that separately.
and then you vote on that separately. And that's like item 7 is the consent agenda, item 8 are items.
Removed from
I've
the
only done
consent
this a few
agenda.
times.
Okay.
Item 8 is items removed from the consent agenda, and that's where, if you as a board member chose to do any item that's on the consent agenda, we would discuss. Does that help?
And when do we have to do that?
Well, that would be at our televised meeting, our big meeting, Monday.
We don't do it ahead like the town council. You could do it that night.
You can do it that.
Yes,
Oh,
the town
I'm
council
sorry, to say
asks.
that you want it
Yeah,
removed
the
from the
town
consent
council asks
agenda?
for that like a week ahead of time.
Gotcha.
We don't
You-
do that.
Literally that night. What I do is I ask all board members before we start the meeting, is there anything you want removed from the consent agenda? I'm sorry, Aaron, I don't mean to
It's
be
okay.
not looking
It's
at you.
helpful. Thank you.
But I ask all board members, is there anything you want removed from the agenda? And so that would be your last Last bite at the apple, if you say, I want it removed, or,
If it's removed, then it gets discussed by the.
then it goes to item 8, which are items removed from the consent agenda that we would discuss it. That's exactly, if that helps.
Yeah, that helps.
Good.
Thank you.
Okay. But I mean, that really doesn't, not something you really want to do. I mean, you can, it's always, I don't mean to belabor this, but it does, it happens, but,
Usually, again, not to continue this, but usually it'll happen, and it's happened very infrequently, but it's usually when additional information has come forward. And sometimes it's about a policy or something like that then we bring as an administrative team to the chair or to the board and say, we have more information. You want to remove this so we can discuss this further.
Or it could be a board member that couldn't make a meeting and says, I would like to have more, I want to have a discussion because I missed it. Can we just rehash it quickly? So that could be another reason. Sure.
So you were yes.
So you want to,
We were all
Yes.
No.
No.
I'm going to say no, but I want the caveat of being able to revisit this when we're done with the 90 people, that 90 score people. In all fairness, I'd like to see what we look like from a statistics standpoint, numbers standpoint. So I say no, but I would like to revisit it if you guys are amenable to that. I don't mean to make extra work for you, but I would like to revisit it after we're done with that bubble of those 90s.
I say yes. As long as we have the caveat in there that kids can still be added regardless of whether or not there's an LSAT.
Yeah.
So now,
It goes.
so it goes,
Actually, it doesn't. Yeah.
And so you have to have
5.
affirmative to move something.
okay. So we'll revisit this at another,
We can always put this back on an agenda. Yeah.
if necessary. But for planning purposes, we're saying that you will go forward with the LSATs in February, correct? For planning
Karen,
purposes
just,
and stuff.
I looked to
Thank you
Ms.
very much.
Levac because I'm correct in stating what I said about the 5, correct?
Yeah.
Okay, I just wanted to clarify.
Yeah, if you
Thank
look
you.
at the town charter.
Thank you. Moving forward, mastery-based learning standards and indicators, transferable skills.
That's me. So as we have done in the past, every time that we have revised or created indicators in the different content areas, we process them through the management team, the mastery-based learning committees at each level, elementary, middle, and high school. Then they go to the district leadership team, and then they come to the Board of Education. So the district has had in place from some time ago, cross-curricular standards. There were 5. We've synthesized, made them a little bit more lean and efficient, and used the word transferable skill to replace those. So this speaks to not a particular content. These could be looked at in any content in any class. It deals with some of the softer skills, communication, problem solving, critical thinking, things that can be across grades, across content. And so the 3 that are in front of you, the first one is effective communicator. The second one is resourceful problem solver.
So, you know what, I'm sorry to
I'm
interrupt.
sorry. Yep.
So as somebody that gets it electronically, that was not an option for me to click
No,
on.
it was
So
not,
do
which is why I presented a
I
copy
didn't
to
get it.
every.
I didn't get it.
Then I will send it to you. It's right over there.
Oh, they're there? Perfect.
Yep, I'm
so
sorry.
Carrie.
No, that's okay.
Let me grab
And then
one.
the third one is informed thinker. What we really tried to do is whittle it down to what we felt were the most important, the most critical, being efficient, collapsing some, combining. And currently, they've gone through, as I said, all the committees at all levels, very well received by each committee and by the district leadership team. So if you have any questions, I'd be more than happy to answer them.
This is a graduation standard?
These are our standards, yes, that will be measured through. And they're not going to be measured in every single course either. But it is up to us as a curriculum department to make sure that they are reviewed frequently enough across several content courses and otherwise to ensure that students have mastered these skills.
Who's responsible for checking these off? What teachers, et cetera?
Well, as our department is writing curriculum, they are ensuring that these are integrated within the curriculum so that it depends on the course. Not all, as I said, not all courses will see every single one of these. CTE is using a lot of them, and as are the other contents. And scoring criteria will be written specifically so that it's age appropriate. Because the children should be experiencing these across the grade levels, from kindergarten all the way through grade 12.
Roxanne?
So that is a perfect segue for my question. So how do we communicate that to our students, that they're either at mastery or developing or off the mark?
I'm sorry.
And parents too, for that matter, I guess,
We
depending
are
on
in
the
the
age
process of
appropriateness.
discussing all of that, quite frankly.
Okay.
We have all of these written into our curriculum as we continue to grow our curriculum and revise our curriculum. It's discussed at that level with the teachers. The teachers are, not all, but many are discussing this with their students. And now we're at the point where, with the exception of music, everybody has a set of standards and indicators that they're working from. In terms of communication to parents, we are discussing at the Mastery-Based Learning Committee and the district leadership team, when do we go public, for lack of a better word, in terms of how parents can view this information. Students are hearing about it within their classes. We need to be more consistent with that. We needed first to ensure there's consistency within a department, within a content. And we're still working in that area. And that's not atypical for it to take as long as it's been taking. We don't want to ever release something out on a report card or otherwise without making sure that we've done our due diligence to ensure consistency. We are at the time where we just discussed it at last month's district leadership team. When do we open the portal so that parents will see their traditional grade given for assignments, but also see how students are performing on the standards and indicators? And so that conversation is happening now to determine when we're ready.
And is also a part of that, I appreciate that, and I appreciate it being a thoughtful process and rather go slow than,
I think the people with the most experience right now is English language arts and mathematics because they've been using them the longest. And they've gone through revision themselves. You just had them, approved in June, kind of the second iteration of them. CTE has a working set for the first time. That was just delivered. Social studies is in kind of a revision stage. Science just was approved in June, and we're trying to be very thoughtful. It is a long process. We want to ensure that before they're open in the portal for all to see, that the teachers have had enough time and enough conversation to ensure that they have confidence in what they're measuring, how they're explaining them to students, how they're scoring them. And so while I know some departments are more ready than others, it's difficult to open, say, the portal for parents to see. You can't do it for one subject area and not others.
And
so that's kind of the situation we're in right now.
that makes sense. Have we had discussions about what percentage of a student's grade could be reflective of? 'Cause I think these soft skills, I think it's great that we're doing this, and I think if you talk to any employer, they will say these are the skills that are really lacking with a lot of our, teenagers and young adults. And so even the fact that we're bringing awareness to this is really important. But are we having discussions about what percentage, or you know what I'm saying, of the grade is to
No,
goes
we're still-
into this?
right.
This goes into it, I should
Correct.
say.
So we're having conversations about that, as well as what does it mean to, what body of evidence do you need to have in order to meet mastery? It's not always a one and done.
Sure.
You know, you want to make sure that there's a certain level of rigor attached to everything that's happening. Not all tasks are created equal. And until you really have a working set of indicators and standards, you can't start having those conversations until you see them in use first, and you kind of get to see the strengths and weaknesses of the documents that you've created. So having these now moving forward, you know, my goal would be to have teachers work with these, not only the transferable skills, but the other standards and indicators that have been developed, working with them religiously over the next year, continuing to have calibration conversations and conversations about the different tasks and how well they align before it's necessarily opened in a portal situation. I think it's important to have conversations with students, because students need to know, you know, in terms of what assignments they're being given, how these indicators and standards match up and what the expectations are, and be able to understand what the teacher wants back and how they can demonstrate mastery. And all of that needs to happen with fidelity and consistency within the content, so that one class isn't, you know, well-versed using them consistently, and then the class next door isn't. So that's kind of the goal and where we're moving forward.
So this is a work in progress. We're not actually doing, this is an informational piece for us today.
This is an informational piece for you this evening.
Thank you.
We would like at some point to, you know, like everything else, to get consensus on utilizing these within our curricular documents. Especially because, as I said, in order to truly calibrate, you need to start using. You can't start using unless they're written into the curricular documents and used with fidelity. So it's the next logical step in how we need to proceed.
Thanks, Carrie.
Mr. Votto?
Just walk me through this for a sec.
Yep.
So I'm a history teacher, all
Yep.
right, U.S. history teacher, 11th grade. And I have standards and indicators as far as content is concerned. And that's pretty much, I can figure out whether a child's mastered something. This also is done in conjunction with that grade?
Yes.
That's the final grade, or is it something separate?
Well, within the units, these would be a part of the unit to be measured through social studies.
Each unit I give them.
Not necessarily. It really is going to depend on the unit, and it's going to depend on the class.
So I get to pick and choose what I use this.
No. When we're writing the curriculum, for example, well, in certain cases, ideally, you would like to get to that point where if you see a wonderful example of it or an opportunity to measure, yes, you should be able to have the example. We're not there yet. So right now, like in English language arts and math, they've written some of these transferable skills, indicators and standards into their units as draft, because they haven't been looked upon by you and crossed that final hurdle. But for example, math might not use, you know, the first, or say the second one under effective communicator, but they might write some of the oral, that the student can orally communicate ideas into their math units. In science particularly as well, in terms of the problem-solving task or critical thinking. But it's not something that I can say to you right now, a teacher in Unit 1 of world history, that they're gonna have every single one of these indicators measured within Unit 1.
And if they do, they try to incorporate that into the child's final grade for that semester or whatever?
It would be,
Maybe?
yes.
Okay, but the thing that bothers me most about all this is, what's the difference between meets mastery and exceeds mastery? Orally communicates ideas clearly and effectively. That can't be easy, that's not easy.
No, and that goes back to what Carrie was saying. That's why we have to come to consensus on something to put in the hands of the teachers, so then they can start collecting a body of evidence. So we could start, before we start actually holding a student accountable.
We have a lot of legwork.
Yeah,
Correct.
this is a long process. But you know what? It's great professional development, because teachers are talking with each other about student work. And they've always done that, but now they're doing it in a context. And when we hear the teachers come to the Master-Based Learning Committee meetings and the district leadership team meetings, that's where there's a lot of professional growth that's happening. They're great teachers, but now they're digging deeper into using a common language.
I mean, this reminds me, when I was a kid, on your report card, you had written English and oral
Yes,
English.
exactly.
Now, how did the teacher know? How do they grade oral English, a B or a C or an A, or an N? You got an N.
Yeah, needs improvement. I remember that
Some
one.
of it is going
You
to
must have
come
had a lot
to
of
from the
names.
type of task that's being assigned.
But you remember that?
We on camera?
Yes.
Sorry, Mike.
I had you for lack self-control.
Is that usually lack self-control?
I will leave it at that.
In this type of situation, when you look at the scoring criteria, it would most likely be banded K2, 3, 5, and then 6, 8, or even possibly 6, 12. The different levels of mastery, you're looking at the type of assignment, the level of rigor of the assignment, the depth of knowledge that the student has to distinguish between a 1, a 2, a 3, or a 4. And that's great conversation in itself. So every time a teacher is creating an assignment aligned to how they're instructing, the questions that should be going through their mind is what indicator and standard does this align to, and with what depth of rigor, so that we're ensuring we're not giving our students just all basic recall types of opportunities, but we're really getting them to dig down deep and think critically about what they're being taught. So that's the goal.
So, right now, tonight, we're just looking at the performance indicators.
Correct.
As far as, like Mike kind of alluded to, as far as what's mastery, what exceeds, that's coming at a later date. So the teachers, in other words, will go back, look at.
defining that.
Yeah,
Correct.
okay, they're gonna look at it, and then, because again, I'm looking at it just because the first time, I'm looking at some of these, a lot of subjective.
Yeah,
It
and it's
can be.
it's like
again,
any.
being a teacher, you're going from one Algebra 1 class to another Algebra 1 class.
Correct.
And, well, I don't know, I wish them all the luck in the world.
And
Well, no,
what
I-
makes them
Define mastery.
Well, but I think though
Everyone can do.
but I think, Pat, I think that was one of the challenges, and I know in our generation of teaching, when we were in the classroom not so long ago, rubrics were the way to go. Everybody had a rubric for something, but when we had rubrics, unless you calibrated, unless you sat down and you looked at the student work and you said, this is a 1, this is a 2, this is a 3, this is a 4, it was all over the place. And exactly, and so that's really where, and there were some places who took time to do that, and some places who didn't, and it was a challenge.
Well,
So that's what we're trying to
We would
do.
sit down like the 6 science teachers, and we'd have all samples, and then everybody'd say, okay,
Exactly.
we made one. What would you give that?
Exactly,
4,
and
that's
so
great.
exactly that was the right way,
Then-
and that's what we do in our
and it
district.
took
So
probably using the same assignments they were more or less required. It
Yep.
might have taken us 2 years to
But there's
finally
als-
get where everybody got on the same page.
exactly, and then that was, see, the challenge is, or the transition is, I should say, is that was assignment specific. So that was regarding one specific assessment. So it's a little bit easier because you could kind of say, okay, here's all the papers, we could stack them, we could categorize them. Now it's taking it to the next level of looking at a student, not just on that one assignment, but throughout that whole portion of the semester or that course. So looking at it, and that's why when we say body of evidence, we look at, okay, it's not just one assessment, it's multiple assessments. It's as Mike was, it's the, looking at these when it fits right. So it fits right into an assessment. You might find, okay, you would never expected a child to be able to demonstrate oral proficiency on a communication skill in a particular assignment, but a student did. So it's catching those moments. And that's why one of the things that comes out of this, which we are excited about, and I know we hear from especially our middle school teachers when we're talking to them, is the whole idea of really looking at an electronic or some type of portfolio for students, so that the students start compiling, so the teacher doesn't have all the work. Because this is really about the student understanding, what does this mean for him or her? This isn't, I got a secret and the child never sees these scoring criteria. The student needs to know what these mean themselves. So that's the exciting part. But again, like you said, this is a lot of work. So we're taking it slowly. The other thing that is interesting, and you all probably know this, but with the NEASC evaluation, students, the school has their standards that they have to report out on all students in terms of certain skills, and most of them are soft skills. This, unfortunately, NEASC in the past have made our 2 high schools have separate sets. We had to have the Lyman Hall set and the Sheen set. This will allow us to pull it together so we have a Wallingford set, and so that this embeds that. That was a very artificial moment in time, very much an artificial moment in time where teachers, and they still, because it's part of our responsibility, and it was a lot of extra work that the teachers did, and some were able to make some connections, but it wasn't as authentic. And I think this will be more authentic when we get it in place, because we don't want to give, everybody has so much to do as it is. Students, teachers, parents, all of us. We don't want to give them a task that's not seen as meaningful. So that's the other really challenge, and the teachers have really stepped up to the plate, having these conversations about what does this look like. And they're kind of proud. I know that, being in the classroom, you're proud when you could come in and say, this is what I would have to demonstrate this particular standard. That's kind of a cool moment for a teacher to be able to do that. Chris, did you want?
I just wanted to say that I think that the student voice is really important in this discussion as well, that it isn't just about the teachers coming together, but it's also about the students having a voice in what the criteria for success is, and having some discussions with students. You would be surprised that they hold themselves to much higher calibrations than you would even expect. And so when they start to have some of those discussions with their teachers, that's really the difference between a teacher who is an effective teacher and a teacher who's an exemplary teacher, is how they involve their students in those discussions and in raising their students' level of mastery. So, just as a person who evaluates, I see that is really clear in the SEED rubric, that in our TVAL rubric, that an exemplary teacher takes the student to that area of where you're outlining criteria for success and making them part of that.
So just clarification, so as we move ourselves forward and continuing this progress, would the social studies department come up with what would meet these criteria, or is it something another group would, would it be the same thing for everybody? What exceeds mastery would be? It would be one.
It's a
criteria
singular
for everybody.
set of scoring criteria that
For
would be
every subject,
utilized by
everybody.
every subject.
But what it looks like might look
Correct. The assignment that it's used towards, yes, but they are going to use the same set of scoring criteria. And our department is currently drafting that, and then we'll bring it through management teams and otherwise, because it's important to have all voices from every level.
So, any other questions? This is informational only, you're not wanting to move it to consent agenda? Thank you. Last but not least, physical restraint. Well, almost last but not least.
I also have a couple of new openings.
Okay.
At our-
So you want to do physical restraint and seclusion of students first?
I did not this was just an update. So at our last meeting, when we had the policy and the regulations, Karen, you had expressed a question in regards to the pharmacological agent and the vagueness, what you felt was vagueness in when you would utilize that. So I had shared that I would reach out to our attorney to see where the language was coming from. So the language stems right from state statute. It refers back to, so that no one singular person is making a decision for the use of that. It refers back to a student's behavioral plan, medical plan, or educational plan, which would be an IEP or otherwise. And it also is in conjunction with existing board policy about administration of medication, which you need a physician's form. It needs to go through the school nurse, and parents are aware. So I just wanted to clarify that for you, that the attorney itself felt that the language was written in that way, didn't specify IEP, but the use of educational plan or medical plan was the way it was intended, and that is, it is in conjunction with other policies so that one person isn't bearing the responsibility or the weight of that decision.
Okay.
So I just wanted to clarify that for you. The policy is online for the new board members, or I can provide it via email
I
to
was
you.
just going to say,
Yep.
Carrie, we've got like 3 or 4 at minimum policies that we're in the middle of reads.
Correct.
So we have 4 new board members
Yep.
that I'm not, I just want to make sure, maybe you can just even explain for board members what we're talking about in terms of updating policy and and the 3 reads and
Okay,
process.
so actually, next week is the 3rd read for several policies that we started back in December. The 3 of the policies were just name updates because Melissa Isles left as our coordinator for guidance. She was our 504 coordinator and our Title VI coordinator. So when she left, we have to update policy because her name was specifically listed in the policy. So non-discrimination, 504, non-discrimination and 504 were up for a change last meeting. We had our 2nd read at the last full board meeting, and then the 3rd read is next week. That was purely a name change. We went to a title instead of a specific person's name so that anytime someone leaves the district, we're not having to continually revise policy. What you will notice, and I will send to all new board members a copy of the policy and the regulations. It's a new policy, physical restraint and seclusion of students. It is a required policy. It is aligned with state statute. We did not have an existing policy on the books for this, and we absolutely need to. So we use model policies from our attorneys. There is a policy and corresponding regulations, and as it relates to this particular and many other policies, if the language is set through state statute and agreed upon by our attorney, the policy committee, which is Mike Votto and Kathy Castelli and now Pat Reynolds, we don't really change the language a lot, but there was some concern in terms of that piece of the policy, and I just wanted to make sure that I addressed it to the entire board prior to the last read.
Thanks.
So I will send those policies to you tomorrow, just so you have a chance to read it before you vote on the 3rd and final read.
Thanks, Carrie.
Thank you.
Just a quick point of reference. Some of you might know there might be a storm tomorrow. And this is actually for the board. I just wanted to, we're still getting closer to maybe having you see the budget. You did get your budget books on Friday. And I know that I did give you an assignment that if you have questions, that assignment is not changing. Like exams, if we have a snow day, we're not moving your assignment. It's still due to me 9 o'clock on Friday.
Don't worry.
If we have no,
Get a mark down if we don't give it to you on Friday?
yes, you'll be barely getting a 2. You'll be getting barely a 2. So the thing is, well, because we have to get a timely response to you. That's the only concern. But the point I want to make, though, is if we do not, and I'm not saying that we don't have school tomorrow, but if for some reason we don't, what I'd like to recommend is that on Monday night's Board of Education meeting, in the televised meeting during operations, that I would do the presentation during that portion of the meeting. At the televised meeting, we figure it's town hall. It's a appropriate televised meeting. We have a meeting scheduled for the 24th, next Wednesday, on the budget. We'd start with just the cafeteria report, cafeteria budget for next year, and the operations report, and then go into questions on the budget, if that's okay with
I heard
everyone.
it's gonna snow on the 24th.
Yeah. 8 to 12.
You're so fresh.
That,
You are
that,
so
that works.
fresh.
So just make sure.
Yeah, I just want to, because I just
So,
want
no,
to,
If we do not have school tomorrow, we do.
then the meeting is canceled, we'll move it to Monday night.
So make
that-
sure you bring your budget
Yeah,
books.
because I'm just concerned that if the way that, it depends on when the storm ends, but we really, I know we don't often get a lot of parents, but I also don't want to make that a situation where people couldn't come if they wanted to come.
Right.
I also would like to have our administrative team, if they're able to come, be able to come to that. The other thing I just wanted to get, I'm just going to share with you that I'll give you a copy of, finally. This, and Karen Vayu and Sue Rowdy, our clerical support for counseling, deserve a tremendous amount of credit. This is our first balanced scorecard. So I just wanted to share this with you. And these were done in-house. They will go out like we usually do have as our Ed Connection. So what this did, and we've been talking about this for 3 years now, so we actually have 3 years of data, if not more. But we have different areas of continuous improvement in dealing with class size, donations, competitive grants, student engagement regarding technology, high school graduation rates, adult education graduation rates, post-high school acceptance rates, persistence ratings, so when a student goes to college, how long, and again, those dates, I will share on that, those ratings are old because the state, we get it, and the state, so I do want to, and I did put a statement here that they're not, they look old, but they're the latest and greatest that we have. I also have AP testing and scores, advanced placement, the varsity scholar honors, honor society, and you'll see some of this in the budget presentation, and then scholarships awarded.
Nice.
So this is our first effort, but I do. This will go home to all the families. Probably in another couple of weeks, we sent it out through our normal printer. I picked up some of the paper to have some of these for you, and then for if we have the meeting tomorrow night or Monday night, they'll be there. But I just wanted to share this with you.
Great.
And publicly, again, thank those two individuals who have done so much on this.
Thank you. Comments from the public? Okay, with no comments from the public, I think we will, I don't need to motion
just
to
adjourn.
adjourn.
Just adjourn.
Adjourn.